Beneath the shifting sands of the Sahel, an entire world lies forgotten, a sprawling tapestry of vanished cities, fallen dynasties, and mysteries that have whispered through the winds for centuries. This vast belt of land, stretching across Africa just south of the Sahara, was once the beating heart of civilizations so grand they rivaled the empires of Europe and Asia. Yet today, their names have faded from maps and textbooks, their stories buried beneath dunes and time. What happened to the 30 legendary kingdoms that once thrived here? Why did their towering walls crumble, their gold-laden courts fall silent? This is a journey into the shadows of history, where archaeologists are just beginning to piece together fragments of a past more extraordinary than fiction. Picture this, a caravan crossing the desert 800 years ago, its camels laden with salt and gold, passing beneath the gates of a city whose towers gleamed in the sun. Markets buzzed with traders speaking a dozen languages, scholars debated under the shade of ancient libraries, kings ruled from palaces adorned with art that defied imagination. These weren't myths, they were real, bustling centers of power and culture, now reduced to faint outlines in the earth. The Sahel was more than a crossroads, it was a cradle of innovation where astronomy, medicine, and architecture reached heights the modern world is only starting to appreciate. Yet one by one, these kingdoms vanished, leaving behind riddles etched in pottery shards and half-standing ruins. What forces toppled societies that once seemed unshakable? Was it climate change that turned fertile lands to dust, wars that razed cities to the ground, or something far more mysterious? For every answer uncovered, a dozen new questions emerge. This video isn't just about rediscovering lost history, it's about unraveling the resilience and ingenuity of people who thrived against impossible odds. As we explore these 30 forgotten realms, you'll witness the echoes of their brilliance, from the hydraulic engineering of ancient Ghana to the celestial observatories of Kanem, from the warrior queens of Dahomey to the goldsmiths whose craftsmanship still baffles experts. The Sahel's kingdoms weren't just lost, they were eclipsed, their legacies waiting for us to listen. So let's dig deeper together into the secrets buried beneath the sand. Before gold meant wealth in Europe, it flowed like rivers through the hands of the Ghana Empire, a realm so rich, its very name became synonymous with treasure. From the 4th to the 13th century, this powerhouse, known as Ouagadougou to its people, commanded the desert like a maestro, turning the harsh Sahel into a stage for one of history's most dazzling trading networks. Picture caravans of 1,000 camels, their loads glittering with gold nuggets the size of fists, snaking across the dunes to reach the empire's capital, Koum by sail. Here, Arab merchants gasped at streets paved with prosperity, where even the king's dogs wore collars of gold and silver. But this wasn't just a kingdom of splendor, it was a marvel of governance. The Soninke people, master architects of this system, built a hierarchy so precise that even the empire's enemies admired it. At the top sat the Ghana, their ruler, who held court beneath a sacred umbrella of silk and gold, presiding over a government with ministers for finance, defense, and foreign trade centuries before such roles existed elsewhere. Taxes were paid not in coins but in golden dust, meticulously measured on scales that balanced the empire's economy. Yet for all its might, Ouagadougou's true genius lay in its pragmatism. While medieval Europe burned witches, Ghana's scholars debated astronomy under the stars, and its lawyers mediated disputes with a legal code that prioritized evidence over superstition. But how does an empire that ruled for 8 centuries suddenly vanish? The answer lies in a perfect storm of calamities. By the 11th century, the Almoravids, zealous warriors from the north, began eyeing Ghana's wealth. Their invasions chipped away at the empire's borders, but the death blow came from an invisible foe, the sky. Tree rings and lake sediments tell a grim story. Decades of unrelenting drought turned the Niger River into a trickle, the savannas to dust. Crops failed, trade routes dried up, and the gold that once built palaces now bought mere crumbs of food. The final twist: some scholars believe the Almoravids didn't conquer Ghana at all, but that the empire, weakened by famine, simply unraveled from within. Today, all that remains are crumbling walls in Mauritania and a single, haunting proverb from the Soninke: the earth grows tired of holding up a kingdom. Yet Ghana's legacy is far from lost. Its model of governance inspired Mali and Songhai, and its name still echoes every time we speak of wealth. From the mines of West Africa to the vaults of modern banks, the land of gold taught the world a lesson. No empire, no matter how glittering, can outlast the changing earth. If Ghana was the land of gold, Mali was the empire that turned that gold into legend. And none loom larger than the Lion King himself, Sundiata Keita. Born into exile, his legs too weak to walk, this prince was written off by his enemies before he could even stand. Yet by 1260, he would unite the fractured Mandinka clans into a force so unstoppable, oral poets still sing of his victory at Karina. Picture the scene: Sundiata's cavalry, clad in padded cotton armor, charging under a hail of poisoned arrows to defeat the sorcerer King Saumayoro Kante. But this wasn't just a warrior's triumph. The real magic lay in what came next. Sundiata drafted the Kuraukan Fauga, a constitution so progressive it banned slavery, protected women's rights, and divided power among clans centuries before Magna Carta's ink dried. Under his rule, Mali didn't just grow rich, it grew wise, laying the groundwork for its most dazzling chapter. Enter Mansa Musa, the emperor who turned wealth into a spectacle. When he left for Mecca in 1324, he didn't travel light. A caravan of 60,000 stretched across the desert, soldiers in Persian silk, heralds waving golden staffs, and 12,000 enslaved people, each carrying a 4-pound bar of pure gold. By the time he reached Cairo, his lavish gifts crashed local economies for a decade. Yet Musa's true legacy wasn't his spending, it was his building. Returning home, he transformed Timbuktu from a dusty outpost into the Oxford of the Sahara. The Sankore University's libraries held 700,000 manuscripts on everything from Euclidean geometry to herbal medicine, while astronomers charted orbits from clay observation decks. This was a city where a poor scholar could trade a book for a house, and where a single debate could make or break a reputation for life. But legends often blur reality. Take the tale of Mansa Abu Bakr Roman II, Musa's predecessor, who supposedly sailed west with 2,000 ships into the Atlantic, never to return. Some claim he reached the Americas 2 centuries before Columbus, though no wreckage has ever been found. More concrete was Mali's slow unraveling. By the 15th century, infighting split the empire's provinces, while Portuguese ships bypassed desert caravans to trade directly with coastal nations. Yet Mali's heartbeat never fully stopped. Today, its gold still backs currencies, its legal codes inspire constitutions, and in Djenné's Great Mosque, the world's largest mud brick structure, the echo of Sundiata's dream lives on in every sun-baked tile. The Songhai Empire didn't just rise from Mali's ashes, it redefined power in the Sahel. By the late 15th century, while Europe was still crawling out of the Middle Ages, a former slave named Askia Mohammed transformed this kingdom into the largest empire Africa had ever seen. His coronation was anything but ordinary. Imagine a warrior king, fresh from overthrowing his predecessor, marching to the Great Mosque of Timbuktu, not to celebrate but to be publicly questioned by scholars. Could he recite the Quran? Did he understand Islamic law? Only after passing this intellectual gauntlet would the clerics declare him Askia the Great, a ruler whose reforms would echo for generations. His genius wasn't conquest but administration. He divided the empire into provinces, each with its own governor, treasurer, and even environmental officer to manage the Niger River's fragile ecosystems. Tax collectors used standardized copper currency, while a network of inspectors ensured no village was overtaxed. Timbuktu became a beacon of learning, where mathematicians calculated pi to 16 decimal places and astronomers mapped the paths of comets. But empires, like sandcastles, are fragile against the tide of change. In 1591, Moroccan troops armed with something the Sahel had never seen, matchlock guns, marched across the Sahara. The shock was catastrophic. Songhai's cavalry, trained for close combat with spears and swords, found themselves cut down before they could even reach the enemy. The Battle of Tondabai wasn't just a defeat, it was a massacre. Within months, the Moroccans sacked Gao and Timbuktu, burning libraries and melting gold artifacts into ingots. Yet the most astonishing chapter wasn't the fall, it was what happened next. Deep in the Niger Delta, a branch of the royal family retreated to Dendi, where they launched a guerrilla war that outlasted entire dynasties. For over a century, these resistance fighters turned the marshes into a fortress, ambushing Moroccan supply lines and preserving Songhai traditions in secret. Even today, Dendi's blacksmiths still forge swords using 15th century techniques, and griots sing of Askia's laws as if the empire never fell. The lesson: some kingdoms don't die, they scatter like seeds, waiting for the right soil to grow again. While empires rose and fell like desert mirages, one kingdom held firm for 1,000 years, anchored not by gold but by water. The Kanem-Bornu Empire wasn't just a player in the Sahel's history, it was the chessboard itself, its fortunes tied to the lifeblood of Lake Chad. Imagine a dynasty so enduring, it outlasted the Roman Empire, the Safawa rulers who began as camel-mounted warlords in the 8th century and ended as sultans exchanging embassies with Ottoman Turkey. Their secret, a mastery of movement. When drought choked Kanem's heartland near the lake, they simply shifted their capital 200 miles west to Bornu, turning crisis into reinvention. Their caravans weren't just trade routes, they were mobile intelligence networks, with merchants doubling as spies who mapped water sources and rebel camps across the Sahara. But whisper the name Zaghawa near Lake Chad even today, and you'll spark debate. Medieval Arab historians claimed the empire's founders were pale-skinned warriors descended from lost Roman legions, a myth the Safawa eagerly promoted to dazzle allies. Modern DNA tests tell a different story. The dynasty's roots stretched deep into the indigenous Kanembu people. This wasn't just vanity, it was realpolitik. By claiming exotic ancestry, the Safawa positioned themselves as both insiders and outsiders, able to mediate between desert nomads and settled farmers. Their genius lay in turning myth into glue, binding fractious clans under a single banner stamped with their emblem, the royal drum, whose sound could summon an army of 30,000 horsemen within days. What truly set Kanem-Bornu apart wasn't its longevity, but its adaptability. When Portuguese ships began bypassing trans-Saharan trade in the 16th century, Sultan Idris Aluma didn't resist, he pivoted. Ottoman musketeers were brought in to train his armies, North African engineers dug fortified wells along new trade routes, and captured cannons were melted down to mint coins bearing his face. At its peak, Bornu's court hosted scholars from Fez to Constantinople debating medicine under the same roof, while their cavalry patrols stretched as far as modern Libya. Yet the empire's most startling legacy might be its paperwork, meticulous land surveys, tax records, and even slave emancipation decrees preserved on gazelle hide scrolls, proof that administration, not just arms, built a millennium of rule. Today, Lake Chad's shrinking waters mirror the empire's faded glory, but in the arched gateways of Ngazagamu's ruins and the still whispered prophecies of Queen Amsa, Kanem-Bornu's pulse still flickers. Its real lesson: survival isn't about staying the same, it's about knowing when to move. While the empires of Ghana and Mali shaped the Sahel with gold and grandeur, the Hausa kingdoms thrived on something far more practical: the art of specialization. Picture a network of 7 independent city-states, each a master of its own craft, Kono, where tanners transformed hides into leather so fine it reached European courts. Katsina, the intellectual hub where scholars debated beneath the stars. Zaria, ruled by warrior queens who commanded armies and built earthen walls so vast they encircled entire cities. These weren't just towns, they were economic powerhouses, their prosperity woven into a delicate web of mutual need. A merchant in Gobia might trade salt for Kono's dyed fabrics, while Dora's blacksmiths forged tools for Rono's rice farmers. This wasn't competition, it was a symphony of interdependence where the success of one fed the survival of all. Yet beneath this practical alliance lay a shared mythos, the legend of Bayajida, a prince fleeing Baghdad who slayed a monstrous snake in Dora's well. The woman who gave him water, Queen Dorama, whose marriage to him birthed the 7 Hausa dynasties. Historians debate whether Bayajida was real or symbolic, but his legacy was undeniable. His story became cultural glue, recited by griots from Kebbi to Kono, uniting the city-states not under one ruler but under one identity. Even as each kingdom minted its own coins and fought its own wars, they shared proverbs, festivals, and an unwritten code called Hausa Bakwai, the 7 virtues of leadership from justice to hospitality. Then came the storm no one foresaw. In the early 19th century, Fulani jihadists, armed with religious fervor and new military tactics, swept across the region. The Hausa kingdoms, fractured by old rivalries, fell one by one. Kono's great dye pits ran red with more than indigo as the Sokoto Caliphate rose from the ashes. Yet here's the twist, the Hausa didn't disappear. Their language became the lingua franca of trade from the Sahara to the coast. Their leatherwork, now stamped with Arabic motifs, adorned Ottoman palaces. Even the legend of Bayajida endured, retold by Fulani conquerors who claimed his bloodline too. Today, the echoes of these kingdoms are everywhere, in the labyrinthine dye pits of Kono, still operating after 600 years, in Katsina's ancient manuscripts preserving astronomy charts, and in the defiant rhythms of the Kalangu drum, once used to warn of invaders, now a heartbeat of resistance and resilience. The Hausa lesson: specialization might build a civilization, but it's story and adaptability that keeps it alive. Deep in the Igbo heartland of modern-day Nigeria, a kingdom once thrived without armies, prisons, or conquest, where power wasn't seized by the sword but bestowed by the gods. The kingdom of Nri, founded around 900 AD, wasn't just a polity, it was a living covenant between earth and sky. At its core stood the Ezenri, a priest-king anointed not by bloodline but by ritual. Imagine a coronation where the candidate was buried alive in a sacred pit for 7 days, emerging only if the earth goddess Alad deemed him worthy, his first act. Not raising taxes or conscripting soldiers, but planting a yam to symbolize his bond with the land. This was a realm where justice flowed from sanctity, not force. Murderers weren't executed but exiled to cleanse the community's spiritual stain, while debts were erased every 7 years in ceremonies honoring cosmic balance. Nri's influence stretched far beyond its borders without a single war. Its priests, wielding staffs of bronze and leopard skins, traveled as far as the Niger Delta, consecrating new settlements with holy chalk and settling disputes through oracles. Their secret: control over O-acute F-letter-1 sacred symbols believed to channel divine truth. A priest could place an O-acute F-letter-1 staff between feuding villages, and both sides would disarm, trusting the gods to arbitrate. Even rival kingdoms like Igbo Ukwu paid homage, sending envoys to Nri for blessings before major decisions. This spiritual network birthed one of Africa's most sophisticated legal systems, where crimes were judged by their ripple effects on the community's harmony rather than rigid penalties. Then came the storm from across the sea. When British colonists arrived in the late 19th century, they couldn't comprehend a kingdom without prisons or armies. To them, Nri's authority, rooted in ritual and consensus, looked like weakness. missionaries demolished shrines, branding the Enri's sacred staffs as pagan idols. The final blow came in 1912 when colonial troops humiliated the reigning priest-king, forcing him to surrender his regalia. Yet Enri's legacy refused to die. During the Biafran War centuries later, Igbo communities revived Enri's peacemaking protocols to shelter refugees, proving that some bonds outlast empires. Today, fragments of this theocracy survive in the Igbo Ukwu bronzes, their intricate swirls whispering of a time when kings drew power not from fear, but from the very soil they swore to protect. Long before Kanem-Bornu cast its shadow over Lake Chad, another civilization thrived in the mud and reads one whose legacy is written not in gold or conquest but in clay. The Sao people left behind no royal chronicles, no lists of kings. Instead, their story whispers through thousands of terracotta figurines, smirking warriors with curved swords, pregnant goddesses with spiral tattoos, and eerie hybrid creatures part human, part crocodile. These weren't mere decorations. Each sculpture was a vessel holding secrets of a society that built fortress cities so vast, their ruins still puzzle archaeologists today. Imagine standing before the walls of Huluf, one of their strongholds. Towering ramparts of packed earth, wider than a city bus, curve for miles around the settlement. Inside, a maze of granaries stocked with sorghum, iron smelting furnaces glowing red, and canals diverting floodwaters from the lake. The Sao didn't just survive in this amphibious world between water and sand, they mastered it. Their fishermen crafted boats from papyrus, while farmers engineered floating gardens that rose and fell with Chad's seasonal floods. But what truly set them apart was their art. Every broken pot, every figurine fragment reveals a culture obsessed with duality, masks split between human and animal faces, statues depicting birth and death in the same breath. Then comes the mystery. Around the 13th century, their cities go quiet. No ash layers from invasions, no mass graves from plagues, just gradual abandonment. Some scholars argue the Sao simply merged with Kanem's rising empire, their terracotta traditions evolving into the bronze work of later kingdoms. Others point to Lake Chad's fickle nature. Core samples show the lake shrank drastically during this period, turning fertile wetlands into cracked earth. Starvation would have scattered communities like dust in the wind. Yet the most haunting theory comes from the Kotoko people, modern descendants who still recount legends of the Sao. They speak of a great turning, when their ancestors chose to become spirits rather than bow to foreign rulers. Walk the shores of Lake Chad today, and you might hear fishermen whisper of clay figures surfacing after storms, faces intact, smiling as if they've been waiting centuries to be found. Whether conquered, displaced, or transformed, the Sao remind us that some civilizations don't truly vanish. They settle into the land itself, emerging piece by piece when the world is ready to listen. The drumbeats of Dagbon still carry the rhythm of an ancient journey 500 miles across the Sahel, from the Niger River's bend to the savannas of modern Ghana. When the Dagomba people arrived in the 12th century, they didn't just find land, they found a battleground. Their first king, Najibiwa, wasn't merely a ruler but a strategist, forging alliances through marriage and warfare in equal measure. His descendants, the Yanars, would wear the skins of slain lions as crowns, their authority etched into the very architecture of power. Picture the royal court at Yendi, a sprawling complex of round huts with conical thatched roofs, where the king's stool carved from a single sacred tree rested atop the bones of his ancestors. Here, justice was dispensed under the Dabari, a tree so ancient its roots were said to whisper verdicts from the spirit world, but Dagbon's strength lay in its contradictions. While neighboring empires centralized power, the Dagomba decentralized it, dividing the kingdom into gate-skins provinces ruled by chiefs who answered to the Yanar but kept their own armies. This wasn't weakness, it was resilience. When drought starved one region, another would send grain. When invaders attacked, gate-skins could mobilize faster than any bureaucratic empire. Their military strategy was brilliance in motion. Cavalrymen on stallions bred for stamina, archers firing arrows dipped in poison harvested from desert roses, and scouts who communicated across miles using tuned horns that mimicked bird calls. Yet the very system that sustained Dagbon also seeded its strife. By the 18th century, rival branches of the royal family, the Abudas and Andonis, began turning succession rituals into blood feuds. The sacred rites meant to crown a new Yana became battlegrounds, with factions debating whether a king's eldest son or his brother should inherit the stool. In 1792, the conflict turned lethal when Ablai, a prince of the Abudu Gate, was skewered on the royal spear during his coronation, an atrocity that fractured the kingdom for generations. Modern maps might label Yendi as just another Ghanaian town, but step into its dusty streets and you'll hear history's echo. In 2002, a massacre over chieftaincy claims left 30 dead and the Yana's palace in flames. Archaeologists sifting through the rubble found relics beneath the ash: 17th century gold weights, a rusted spearhead engraved with the crest of Najibuwa, and most hauntingly, fragments of the dabari tree's roots still entwined with human bones. Today, Dagomba elders speak of reconciliation, but the drums at funerals still beat the old rhythms, a reminder that some wounds run as deep as lineage itself. The lesson of Dagbon isn't just about power lost, it's about how kingdoms live on in the vows we keep and the ones we break. The Mossi kingdoms rose from the dust of the Sahel with one weapon no empire could break: the thunder of hooves. While Islamic caliphates expanded across West Africa, these horse lords of modern-day Burkina Faso carved out a realm so fiercely independent, even the mighty Songhai emperors failed to bring them to heel. At the heart of their resistance lay Ouagadougou, a city whose name meant where people get honor, and for the Mossi, honor meant never bowing to foreign faith or rule. Their cavalry, mounted on stallions bred for the punishing savannah, struck with such speed that Arab chroniclers described them as ghosts who rode the wind. But this wasn't just a warrior culture. The Mossi built a society where age dictated authority, where councils of elders tempered the power of kings, and where the earth itself was governed by priestesses who communed with ancestral spirits through sacred groves. Every Mossi child knows the story of their origins, not in battle or conquest, but in rebellion and love. Princess Yenenga, the dazzling daughter of a 12th century Dagomba king, refused to be bartered in marriage like cattle. Disguised as a man, she fled on her warhorse, piercing through the night until exhaustion claimed her in the bush. There, she met Raile, an elephant hunter from the Bausansi people. Their son, Awadreyogo Stallion, in their tongue would found the first Mossi state, weaving his father's hunter traditions with his mother's royal blood. Today, his name still echoes in Burkina Faso's streets, a testament to the union that birthed a nation. What made the Mossi unconquerable wasn't just their spears, but their adaptability. When Islamic scholars arrived from Timbuktu, they were welcome to debate but never to convert. The Mossi emperors, or Moro Nobas, kept a delicate balance, adopting Arabic script for administration while preserving their own spiritual rites. During the Great Jihad of the 19th century, when Fulani armies swept across the Sahel, Ouagadougou's gates held firm. The secret, a network of earthen fortresses so vast, their ruins still crisscrossed the landscape, and a spy system that used drum language to relay messages faster than any horseman. Modern archaeologists digging at Pabre have uncovered the Mossi's hidden genius iron smelters buried beneath termite mounds to conceal their glow from enemies, and granaries designed to outlast decade-long droughts. But the kingdom's heartbeat survives in the annual Moro Noba ceremony, where the emperor reenacts Yenenga's flight, a golden horsetail whisk in his hand. As the sun rises over Ouagadougou's red clay walls, the message is clear: some kingdoms never fall. They change gait, shifting from gallop to canter, but always moving forward. In the humid forests of southern Nigeria, a city once gleamed with walls so vast they dwarfed the Great Wall of China in sheer scale, not in length but in ambition. The Kingdom of Benin, ruled by the Oba from his crimson-painted palace, was a marvel of urban planning and metallurgy centuries before European ships darkened its shores. This wasn't just a kingdom, it was a living archive cast in bronze. Every plaque adorning the palace walls told a story: foreign dignitaries prostrating before the Oba, Portuguese traders in peaked hats offering gifts, leopards with coral-studded collars pacing courtyards. These weren't decorations, they were court records meticulously documenting ceremonies, alliances, and even tax disputes in metal that would outlast paper. The Edo people called their homeland Edo, but Portuguese explorers, hearing the local dialect, mispronounced it as Benin, a name that stuck. By the 15th century, Benin's artisans had perfected the lost wax casting technique, producing bronzes so precise they captured individual facial scars and the drape of embroidered robes. One plaque shows a palace attendant shielding the Oba's sacred head from a fly, a detail so intimate it suggests these weren't just propaganda, but snapshots of daily royal life. The kingdom's guilds operated like medieval European craft unions, with secrets passed down in families for generations. A single bronze head could take months, the wax model destroyed in the process, making each piece irreplaceable. Then came 1897. British troops, retaliating for an ambush on their trade mission, burned the palace to the ground. Soldiers pried plaques from smoldering walls with bayonets, packed them in crates labeled war booty, and shipped them to London. Over 1,000 bronzes vanished into private collections and museums from Berlin to Boston. But here's the twist: those looted artifacts became Benin's unwitting ambassadors. When European curators first saw them, they refused to believe Africans could have created such artistry. Some insisted they must be relics of a lost Roman colony. The controversy forced the world to confront its prejudices, sparking debates about African civilizations that still rage today. Modern laser scans of the bronzes reveal even deeper layers. Traces of gold leaf on court musicians' anklets hint at a wealth that dazzled early visitors. Microscopic imprints of woven cloth on warrior plaques match textile fragments found in Portuguese shipwrecks, proof of a thriving Atlantic trade. Most haunting are the Iroko wood frames still clinging to some plaques in museum storage, remnants of the palace walls that once held them. Benin City today thrives as a modern Nigerian metropolis, but in its royal quarter, the Oba still presides over ceremonies where leopard skins are spread for his feet, just as the bronzes depict. Recent repatriations of looted artifacts have brought fragments of that shattered archive home, piece by piece. Each returned plaque is more than art, it's a cipher, waiting to reveal another line in a story the flames of 1897 couldn't erase. The kingdom's legacy isn't just in metal, but in the unbroken thread of memory that still ties the Edo people to the splendor their ancestors forged from fire and wax. Beneath the towering mud brick walls of Dahomey, a kingdom thrived on a paradox where reverence for life and ritualized death walked hand in hand. The kingdom of Dahomey, rising in the 17th century from the ashes of civil wars, became legendary not just for its wealth in enslaved captives and palm oil, but for something that stunned European visitors: an all-female military regiment so fierce they were dubbed the Amazons after the warrior women of Greek myth. These weren't merely soldiers, they were the king's personal guard, sworn to celibacy and trained to fight with rifles, machetes, and their bare hands. Dutch traders recorded battles where these women, clad in indigo tunics and elephant hide armor, charged through hails of bullets, their war cries chilling even veteran mercenaries. Yet Dahomey's most infamous legacy was the annual customs, or Exwatanu, a festival that French colonists would later weaponize to justify conquest. For weeks, the kingdom transformed into a spectacle of tribute and terror. Captives from recent wars were paraded before the king, their fates decided by a complex calculus of politics and divination. Some were integrated into society as laborers or even future Amazons. Others met a grimmer end executed in public ceremonies to honor deceased royals and strengthen cosmic order. Contemporary accounts describe priests using throwing knives to sever spinal cords with surgical precision, a practice rooted in the belief that spilled blood nourished the earth and ancestors. Here's where history twists. French colonial reports inflated these rituals into lurid propaganda, exaggerating death tolls into the thousands to paint Dahomey as a barbaric state needing civilizing. Modern archaeological work tells a different story. Excavations at the Songhai ritual pits reveal far fewer remains than colonial records claimed, while oral histories describe strict protocols limiting sacrifices, often no more than a dozen per year. The French, hungry to seize Dahomey's lucrative palm oil trade, had every incentive to sensationalize. Their own archives contradict official narratives. Private letters from officers admit Amazons fought with discipline surpassing our own, and that Dahomey's courts had laws protecting enslaved people from arbitrary abuse, hypocrisies buried beneath propaganda. The kingdom's downfall came not from moral weakness but from technological disparity. In 1892, French machine guns mowed down charging Amazons at the Battle of Cotonou, their bravery no match for industrial slaughter. Yet even in defeat, Dahomey left a defiant legacy. Today, descendants of the Amazons dance at festivals in Benin, their steps recreating battlefield formations. The royal palaces of Dahomey, now an UNESCO site, bear bas-reliefs of leopards, symbols of kings who claimed the beast's strength. And in a final irony, France's own museums now struggle to repatriate looted Dahomeyan treasures, including thrones woven from human hair and sacred swords. The truth, Dahomey was neither the monstrous caricature of colonial posters nor a utopia, but a kingdom whose complexities outlasted the empires that tried to erase it. In the rolling savannas of Senegal, the Kingdom of Sign stood apart, not just for its power but for the women who steered its destiny. For centuries, this Sahara kingdom defied the patriarchy dominating the Sahel, building a society where queens and princesses weren't mere consorts but the architects of lineage and law. Here, royal blood flowed through mothers, not fathers. When a king died, it wasn't his son who inherited the throne, it was his sister's eldest child. This matrilineal system, called teen, ensured power remained within the maternal clan, a tradition so deeply rooted that even today, Sahara oral historians trace every past ruler back to the primordial mother, Mbang Sen. The genius of Sign's system lay in its balance. While women controlled succession, male relatives, uncles and brothers served as regents and military leaders, creating a checks and balances dynamic rare in medieval Africa. A queen mother could veto wars she deemed wasteful, while a warrior uncle might rally troops to defend fertile rice paddies along the Saloum Delta. This wasn't just about gender, it was about sustainability. By tethering power to maternal lines, Sign avoided the dynastic civil wars plaguing neighboring kingdoms. After all, you can't dispute a successor whose right was literally written in their blood. Then came 1867, the year Sign's ancient ways faced their fiercest test. Muslim jihadists led by Maba Dayak Hubar, a charismatic cleric, swept through West Africa, toppling traditional rulers and enforcing Islam by the sword. For decades, entire kingdoms had crumbled before his armies, but when Dayak Hu's forces marched into Sign, they were met not by a king, but by Queen Ndoye Demba and her Taido's elite animist warriors clad in lion manes and iron amulets. At the Battle of Fandane Thiawathiaun, history pivoted. The Sahara didn't just fight with spears, they fought with psychology. Days before the clash, Sign's priestesses had performed the Qum ritual, burying sacred pots of herbs along the jihadists' path to curse their vision. As Dayak Hu's cavalry charged, their horses reportedly reared in panic, throwing riders into pits of poisoned stakes. The Taidos, masters of guerrilla warfare, used the dense baobab forests to ambush, their archers firing arrows tipped with Mburu poison from the ordeal tree. By sundown, Mobadiak, who lay dead, his skull pierced by a Sura lance, a defeat so shocking it halted Islamic expansion in the region for a generation. Modern scholars still debate the battle's details, but the aftermath is clear. Sign's victory preserved its matrilineal traditions even as French colonists encroached. Today, in the village of Diakhou, you can stand where Queen Ndoye Demba held court, her throne room's pillars still etched with symbols of the Pangul ancestral spirits who guided her reign. The real triumph wasn't just military, it was cultural. While other Sahelian kingdoms erased pre-Islamic histories, Sign's oral epics, like the Odiadne, still recount the heroism of women who ensured their world wouldn't be rewritten by sword or scripture. On the surface, Fandane Thiawathian was a clash of faiths, but dig deeper and it reveals something more profound, a kingdom where power wasn't taken, but entrusted, where the past wasn't just remembered, but carried forward in the bloodlines of those who refused to let their story end. While the sands of the Sahel swallowed many kingdoms whole, the kingdom of Saloum chose a different path to immortality, one built not on gold or conquest but on shells. Millions upon millions of them, stretching along Senegal's delta, the Coquelige's ancient shell mounds rise like ghostly hills, some towering over 50 feet high. These aren't natural formations, they're the work of generations who lived, traded, and buried their dead here for over a millennium. Each layer tells a story, oyster shells from feasts, pottery shards from rituals, and bones, so many bones laid to rest with care that defies time. The real mystery lies beneath the largest mound, dubbed the Tomb of the Kings by locals. Unlike Egypt's pyramids, this burial site hides in plain sight, its entrance obscured by tangled roots and layers of crushed mollusks. In 1982, archaeologists tunneling through its compacted layers made a find that rewrote Sahelian history. A chamber lined with mangrove poles, holding the remains of 7 rulers adorned with copper bracelets and beads made from Mediterranean glass, proof of trade networks stretching farther than anyone imagined. But it's the whispers of golden scepters that haunt researchers. Early 20th century French reports mention a farmer stumbling upon a scepter here, its shaft engraved with serpents before it vanished into colonial coffers. No photo exists, only a scribbled sketch in a dusty archive that matches descriptions of royal regalia from Sura oral epics. What makes Saloum's mounds extraordinary isn't just their scale, over 200 sites spanning 7 miles, but what they reveal about a kingdom that thrived on paradox. These were a people who built empires from the sea yet feared its depths, believing spirits lurked beneath the waves. Their fishermen wove nets from baobab fibers while their priests divined the future with cowrie shells. Even death here was a dialogue. Excavated skeletons show deliberate fractures, bones broken post-mortem, then mended with clay in rituals meant to free the soul. Modern Soninke elders still warn against disturbing the mounds after dark, claiming the Pangul ancestral spirits guard their secrets with storms. In 2019, a team using ground-penetrating radar detected hollow chambers beneath the largest mound, their shapes too precise for nature. But the real treasure may be intangible. Embedded in these shells are traces of DNA from crops like African rice, proving Saloum's farmers pioneered flood-resistant agriculture centuries before climate change made it urgent. Saloum's legacy isn't just in what was lost, but in what persists. Along the delta today, women still use ancient techniques to farm shellfish, their methods unchanged since the kingdom's zenith. The mounds themselves are now UNESCO protected, not as ruins, but as living archives, their layers still growing, still hiding stories waiting for the right tide to reveal them. Where the Senegal River bends toward the Atlantic, a kingdom once thrived as Islam's first bridgehead into West Africa, Takra, a name that still sparks debates among historians. Unlike the gold empires to its east, Takra built its legacy on faith and river trade. its mud brick mosques rising beside bustling ports where Berber camel caravans met Wolof canoe fleets. By the 11th century, its ruler War Jabai made a decision that would ripple across centuries. He converted to Islam not just as a personal creed but as state policy. This wasn't mere symbolism. Takra became the first sub-Saharan kingdom to mint coins inscribed with the Shahada, its courts adopting Sharia law while maintaining traditional Wolof titles like Laman for provincial chiefs. Arab geographer al-Bakri marveled at the sight of veiled African judges presiding over cases alongside animist elders, a delicate balance of old and new. But was Takra's Islamization truly voluntary? Dig into oral traditions and you'll hear darker whispers. The epic of Jomba Enjoy, a legendary warrior priest, describes how War Jabai's forces burned sacred groves and smashed ancestor shrines, imposing the new faith by the sword. Archaeologists have found evidence to support both narratives. A 10th century mosque foundation layered atop sacrificed ram skulls, suggesting a fusion rather than a clean break. What's undeniable is Takra's role as a template. Its model of Islamic kingship would later inspire Mali's Mansa Musa, who stopped here to consult scholars before his famed Hajj. The kingdom's demise in the 13th century is shrouded in river mists. Some blame the Almoravid invasions, others point to silt choking its ports. Yet Takra's most enduring mystery lies in its name. The modern Taukulor people of Senegal and Mauritania claim descent from its citizens, but linguists note their Fulfulde dialect bears traces of Soninke fueling theories that Takra wasn't ethnically homogeneous, but a melting pot where identities blurred. 19th century jihadist El Hajj Yuma Tall deliberately revived the Taukulor label for his empire, weaponizing this contested heritage to unite disparate clans against French colonizers. Today, the ruins of Takra's capital, possibly near modern Poda, lie buried under sugarcane fields, but descend into the basement of Senegal's Ifan Museum, and you'll find its ghost in a single artifact, a gold dinar stamped with War Jabai's name, its edges worn smooth by centuries of trade. Like the river that birthed it, Takra's legacy meanders, sometimes underground, sometimes surging into view, but never truly gone. The kingdom of Jollof wasn't just an empire, it was an experiment in balance where power flowed like the Senegal River, sometimes pooling in the hands of a single ruler, sometimes scattering into tributaries of rebellion. At its height in the 14th century, the Wolof people wove a confederation so sprawling it stretched from the Mauritanian desert to the Gambia's mangrove swamps. But what made Jollof extraordinary wasn't its size, it was the way it governed, a delicate dance between the central Buuba Jollof in his capital at Lingra and the semi-independent states orbiting him. Each province retained its own dialects, customs, and even armies, bound together by little more than shared lineage and the annual Zui festival, where diviners from every corner gathered to predict rains, wars, and harvests. Then came 1549, the year the dance turned to discord. For decades, the outlying kingdoms had chafed under taxes levied to fund Jollof's wars against the Berbers. When Berber Jalal Embe insisted on raising tribute yet again, the provinces exploded. The rebellion didn't just topple a king, it shattered an empire. From its fragments arose three defiant new kingdoms: Wollo, where matrilineal queens ruled alongside warrior councils; Kea, home to the Lingier, a princess mother whose word could veto wars; and Bayol, where farmers wielded veto power over their rulers through the Jamba, a grassroots assembly. What seemed like collapse was actually reinvention. These successor states flourished, developing systems of checks and balances that would later inspire Senegal's modern democracy. Centuries later, Léopold Sédar Senghor, Senegal's first president and a poet of global renown, would immortalize Jollof's legacy in verse. His elegy pour le Berber Jollof paints the fallen king not as a tyrant, but as a tragic figure caught between tradition and change. Your voice once rolled like thunder over the peanut fields, now whispers through the baobab's hollow trunks. Senghor saw in Jolloff's story a metaphor for post-colonial Africa, a reminder that empires may fracture but cultures endure. Modern Wolof griots still sing of the rebellion, their lutes thrumming with the rhythm of hooves as they describe the moment the Buba's cavalry faltered. But dig beneath the epic poetry and you'll find something startling. Archaeological surveys near Lingra revealed charred grain silos and hastily buried weapons, proof the conflict wasn't just political, it was personal. In the ruins of a noble's compound, excavators found a child's bracelet engraved with the crest of Wollo's first queen, suggesting even families split along factional lines. Jolloff's lesson: decentralization can be a kingdom's greatest strength until the threads holding it together snap under pressure. Today, as Senegal debates federalism versus centralized rule, the echoes of 1549 grow louder, whispering that the past is never truly past. The kingdom of Kabu rose from the ashes of Mali's decline like a phoenix forged in iron and fire. When the great Malian Empire fractured in the 15th century, its general Turamakan Traore didn't just retreat, he reinvented warfare itself. Marching his Mandinka warriors southwest into the lush forests of modern Guinea-Bissau, he carved out a realm where cavalry tactics met jungle guerrilla warfare, creating a military machine unlike anything the Sahel had seen. Kabu's soldiers, known as Simban, didn't just wear armor, they became it, layering quilted cotton with charms woven by women initiates of the Kanem-Bornu secret society. These weren't mere decorations, oral traditions tell of arrows glancing off warriors who'd been ritually anointed with oils said to turn metal to water. Then came 1537, the year Kabu faced its most formidable foe, Portugal's expanding empire. At the Battle of Rio Jeba, King Turamakan's forces ambushed Portuguese caravels navigating the river's narrow bends. Griot epics still sing of the moment when Kabu's war canoes, camouflaged with mangrove branches, emerged like specters from the fog. The Portuguese accounts tell a different story of crossbow bolts bouncing off shields made from hippopotamus hide, and African archers firing arrows dipped in a poison so potent one scratch could kill a man within hours. What neither side disputes is the outcome. A stalemate so shocking it forced Lisbon to rethink its West African ambitions. For decades afterward, Portuguese maps marked Kabu's territory with a single ominous word: resistência. Yet Kabu's true power wasn't just in battle, it was in memory. The kingdom's griots, or Jolly, didn't merely record history, they weaponized it. Their songs preserved the names of fallen heroes with such precision that modern researchers have matched oral lists to 16th century Portuguese payrolls, proving Kabu's spies infiltrated enemy ranks. One chant, the Turamakan Fossa, recounts the king's tactical genius in verses so rhythmically complex, scholars believe they doubled as encrypted battle plans. Even today, when a Jolly strikes the chorus 21 strings to sing of Rio Jeba, listeners swear they can hear the clang of swords in the melody. The kingdom's downfall came not from European guns, but from within. By the 18th century, infighting between Kabu's noble clans, the Sanai and the Manai, weakened its defenses. Fulani jihadists exploited these divisions, sacking the capital Kansala in 1867. But walk through Guinea-Bissau's forests today, and you'll find traces of Kabu's indomitable spirit. Blacksmiths still forging blades using the empire's signature triple folding technique, and village elders who recite Turamakan's laws verbatim, their words carrying the weight of 6 centuries. The kingdom may have fallen, but its legacy lingers like the echo of a war drum in the humid night air, a reminder that some defeats are merely preludes to immortality. The kingdom of Kano holds its history not in crumbling ruins, but in words, thousands of them, meticulously preserved in the Kano Chronicle, a manuscript so vital it's often called West Africa's Book of Kings. Unlike dry European annals, this 15th century document pulses with life, blending fact and folklore into a saga where kings walk with spirits and blacksmiths reshape destiny. The chronicle begins not with a conqueror but with a craftsman, Bagorda, who in 999 AD supposedly took power not through birthright but because his iron tools could tame the land. His ascension marks a radical idea that skill could trump lineage in the Sahel, where bloodlines usually dictated thrones, but the chronicle isn't just a king list, it's a cipher. Hidden between its Arabic script and Hausa proverbs are clues to Kano's transformation from a cluster of huts to a metropolis whose dyes-colored cloth from Timbuktu to Tripoli. Take the reign of Muhammad Rumfa in the 15th century. Court scribes describe him consulting a mysterious white man from the east, likely an Ottoman scholar, to redesign Kano's walls with zigzag gates, a defense against cavalry charges that baffled invaders for centuries. Rumfa didn't stop there. He codified laws punishing embezzlement with hand amputations, while simultaneously building the Gidan Rumfa, a palace so vast its ruins still stretch across modern Kano's skyline. Then there's Queen Amina of Zaria, whose legend eclipses history itself. The chronicle devotes just 7 lines to her, yet Hausa griots spin epics of a warrior who led armies in 7,000 battles, her armor gleaming like moonlit water. Did she truly conquer lands as far as Nupe, or did oral tradition amplify a regional general into a pan-Sahelian icon? Archaeology hints at truth beneath the myth. Excavations along the Ganuwa Amina's walls reveal 14th century fortifications matching her supposed campaigns. More telling are Portuguese records from 1580, noting trade with a Hausa queen whose arrows outnumbered locusts. The chronicle's real genius lies in its silences. King lists abruptly skip generations, likely purging unpopular rulers. One entry cryptically states, "In his time, the locusts ate the crops and the people ate the locusts." Was this famine or a metaphor for tyranny? Modern linguists note Hausa's dual meanings. Fari can mean both white and peace, while Baki means black and trouble. Such wordplay suggests the scribes embedded critiques dangerous to voice aloud. Today, Kano's past lives in unexpected places. The city's famed Kerma market still occupies Rumfa's original trading grounds, where dyed indigo fabrics hang like echoes of medieval wealth. Meanwhile, blacksmiths in the Kafar mata quarter forge tools using techniques Bagorda would recognize. Their bellows roar a whisper across 1,000 years. The Kano Chronicle endures not as a relic but as a mirror, one that reflects how history isn't just recorded but carefully curated, reminding us that every kingdom writes its legacy in the language of those who survived to tell it. The kingdom of Katsina wore 2 faces, one bathed in the lamplight of Quranic study, the other whispering secrets from an older, darker world. By the 18th century, its scholars had turned the city into a beacon of Islamic learning, where students memorized entire libraries under the mango trees of the Gobarau minaret's shadow. This towering structure, its mud bricks mixed with sacred oils, served as both timekeeper and classroom, its muezzin's voice marking hours of debate over Al-Ghazali's treatises. But dig beneath these orderly layers of scholarship, and you'll uncover a far stranger truth. The very ground beneath Katsina's mosques once pulsed with the rituals of the Derbawa, an enigmatic people who ruled here before the Hausa, wielding power that later chroniclers could only describe as sorcery. The Annals of Katsina, a fragmented manuscript hidden in private collections, tells of kings who communed with sandstorms. One passage describes a Derbawa ruler, Magajan Derbai, summoning whirlwinds to repel invaders only for the winds to turn on his own people when his sacrifices displeased the spirits. Archaeologists have found eerie corroboration, a stratum of fused glass beneath Katsina's old palace, identical to desert fulgurites formed by lightning strikes. Was this evidence of some lost technology, or simply poetic license hardening into legend? The lines blur further with Queen Dorama's tale, a pre-Hausa ruler said to have married the serpent Saki, whose scales left shimmering trails in the dust. Modern geologists note the region's high mica deposits, Could this serpent's glitter have been clever mineral exploitation spun into myth? Yet Katsina's real pivot came when these worlds collided. In 1722, scholar Muhammad ibn Masoni dared to merge the arcane with the academic. His Kitab al-Asrar, Book of Secrets, recorded Derbawa star lore alongside astronomical tables, noting how ancient rain-calling rituals aligned with Saturn's cycles. The book was nearly burned as heresy until Katsina's emir realized its predictions outmatched Arab star charts for forecasting droughts. This uneasy synthesis birthed a unique intellectual tradition. At the famous Dora College, students still debate whether the annals' lost chapters, rumored to detail alchemical transmutations, were destroyed by pious reformers or hidden by guardians of dangerous knowledge. Walk Katsina's old quarters today and the duality lingers. The Gobarau minaret still stands, but so do the hollow baobabs where Derbawa priests once stored ritual objects. In the market, women sell tansa charms blending Quranic verses with pre-Horsa glyphs, while craftsmen forge brass rings said to channel both Barocca and ancestral magic. The kingdom's greatest lesson: knowledge isn't just preserved in libraries sometimes, it hides in the cracks between faith and folklore, waiting for those willing to read between the lines. The towering earthen walls of Zazao stand as silent witnesses to one of the Sahel's most debated legacies, the reign of Queen Amina, whose name echoes through Horsa history like a war drum. While the Kano Chronicle reduces her to a few cryptic lines, oral epics paint her as a warrior queen who led cavalry charges in 7,000 battles and built fortifications so vast they're still called Ganuwar Amina's walls, centuries later. But peel back the layers of legend and a more complex story emerges. Recent translations of Nupe clay tablets tell of a different Zazao, one where Amina may have shared power with her brother Kerma in a rare co-regency, their names appearing together on tribute records from the 15th century. These fragile tablets, preserved in the dry sands near the Niger River, reveal a kingdom under siege. Nupe accounts describe Zazao's walls not as triumphant monuments, but as desperate defenses against their own invading forces. One particularly vivid tablet depicts Amina and Kerma overseeing the construction of a fortified gate, their joint seals stamped into the clay, an unusual detail for a culture that typically recorded sole rulers. Could the famous queen have been part of a ruling duo? Archaeologists examining Zazao's ruins have found supporting evidence: twin thrones in the palace's inner chamber, and a ceremonial sword with two hilts fused into one blade, symbolizing shared authority. Yet the mystery deepens when you track Amina's supposed conquests. Portuguese maps from 1580 mark a Reino de Amina, stretching from the Benue River to Kano, but local tax records tell another story. Scrolls from Kano's Gidan Makama Museum show payments to Zazao's treasury suddenly doubling around 1575, not from conquered lands but from trade agreements. Amina's empire may have been less about territorial domination and more about economic alliances sealed by her famed gold-armored cavalry, those legendary walls. Some sections now appear to be ancient trade route markers, their zigzag patterns matching caravan rest stops across 7 modern states. The most tantalizing clue lies in a recent discovery at Zaria's old palace grounds, a buried chamber containing a corroded brass helmet with Arabic inscriptions. When conservators painstakingly cleaned it, they uncovered not one name but two, Amina wa Kerma, etched alongside a symbol resembling the Nupe royal crest. Was this a war trophy, a diplomatic gift, or proof of a forgotten peace treaty? The helmet's interior bears grooves, suggesting it was designed for 2 separate headpieces to lock together, perhaps worn in tandem during ceremonies. Historians remain divided. Some argue Amina's solo legend was amplified by colonial ethnographers fascinated with the idea of an African warrior queen. Others point to the Dora Chronicles, where a female ruler named Amina is mentioned leading joint military campaigns with her sibling. Whatever the truth, Zazao's legacy transcends simple conquest. Those crumbling walls whisper of a kingdom that mastered both war and statecraft, where leadership may have been more fluid and more collaborative than our modern imaginations can grasp. The real Amina, whoever she was, defies easy categorization, her story woven as intricately as the famed Zazao indigo textiles that still dye the hands of craftsmen cobalt blue today. High in the blistering heart of the Sahara, where dunes give way to jagged volcanic peaks, the Kingdom of Air carved its legacy not in gold or conquest, but in stone and stars. This Tuareg federation, often overlooked in Sahelian histories, ruled a realm so vast its borders shifted with the camel caravans that were its lifeblood. Their capital, Agadez, wasn't just a city, it was a celestial compass. The 15th century mosque at its center, with its tapering minaret spiraling 90 feet into the cobalt sky, served as both prayer tower and navigation landmark. Caravanners from Timbuktu to Tripoli could spot its silhouette from 50 miles away, its clay walls stained indigo with crushed woad dye to shimmer like a mirage in the desert light. But the real secret lies in its alignment. Archaeoastronomers recently discovered the minaret's shadow at noon during the summer solstice points directly to a series of petroglyphs hidden in the nearby Aya Mountains. These ancient rock carvings, some dating back 5,000 years, depict constellations with eerie precision. Orion's belt mirrored in the arrangement of 3 carved antelopes, the Pleiades clustered as a herd of camels. For the Kel Air Tuareg, these weren't just art, they were star maps. Their Asak navigators, draped in indigo veils to filter the sun's glare, used these markers to guide caravans across featureless plains where shifting sands erased trails within hours. The kingdom's most astonishing feat wasn't just stellar navigation, it was cultural synthesis. In Agadez's dusty archives, researchers found 17th century manuscripts blending Islamic astronomy with older Tuareg sky lore. One page shows the Qibla direction for Mecca superimposed over a pre-existing diagram of the Milky Way, labeled in Tifinagh script as Tafakt en Waddle, the River of Heaven. This fusion of knowledge reached its peak in the Taglamt ceremony, where caravan leaders would gather at the mosque to calibrate their compasses not just to magnetic north, but to the rising of Canopus, the brightest star after Sirius. Modern satellite imagery reveals why this mattered. The Aya petroglyphs align with natural wells along forgotten trade routes too fragile to mark visibly without attracting raiders. By encoding their locations in celestial patterns, the Tuareg created a navigation system that was both precise and deniable. Even today, elder Imajigan nobles guard the full meanings of these carvings, passing down star chants that describe water sources in metaphors only initiates comprehend. Yet Air's greatest mystery remains unsolved. In 2018, laser scans of the mosque's minaret detected hollow chambers within its walls, spaces too small for rooms but perfect for storing scrolls. Local legends speak of an Akabaritan star box hidden there, a copper chest containing astrolabes calibrated to Saharan latitudes. Whether it's myth or reality, one truth endures. In this kingdom where the earth was too unstable to trust, people placed their faith in the eternal dance of stars, etching their wisdom in stone and sky for those who dare to look up. The Kingdom of Air never minted coins or erected statues to its kings. Its rulers left no grand tombs, just the minaret's shadow stretching across the dunes each dawn, pointing the way not merely to water or wealth, but to a deeper understanding of how civilizations can flourish even in the harshest lands if they learn to read the language of the heavens. The Kingdom of Damagaram rose from the scorched earth of the southern Sahara not by chance, but by chains, thousands of them, forged in the fires of a brutal yet brilliant economy. When Tuareg warlords established Zinda in 1731, they chose its location with chilling precision, astride the crossroads where trans-Saharan slave routes met the expanding frontiers of the Sokoto Caliphate. What began as a desert outpost soon mushroomed into a city of paradoxes, where clay walls 30 feet high sheltered both scholars and slavers, where Quranic verses mingled with the clinking of manacles. German explorer Heinrich Barth's 1851 sketches of Zinder's Burney district reveal a fortress city designed to awe and intimidate. His delicate pencil lines capture towering Tuboli walls, sun-baked bricks stacked in alternating convex and concave patterns to confuse attacking cavalry. Narrow alleys twist like labyrinthine traps, funneling invaders into kill zones where defenders could rain arrows from hidden platforms. But look closer at Barth's margins and you'll spot chilling details. Iron rings cemented into walls where captives were tethered, and strange grooves in the clay later identified as tally marks counting human cargo. Yet Damagaram's power wasn't just built on suffering. The kingdom's rulers, the Sarkans, transformed Zinder into a hub of Islamic scholarship rivaling Timbuktu. Barth's journals describe a palace library holding illuminated manuscripts on mathematics and medicine, their margins annotated in both Arabic and Hausa. The same hands that signed slave permits also endowed madrasas where students debated philosophy under neem trees. This duality reached its peak under Sultan Tanamaun, who in 1845 commissioned a grand mosque with an ingenious cooling system. Wind towers channeling desert breezes through clay pipes, while beneath its courtyard, cisterns stored ice harvested from distant mountains. Archaeologists examining the Burney walls today have uncovered even darker secrets. Ground-penetrating radar reveals subterranean chambers beneath the Sultan's stables, not treasure vaults but barracks for the Yan Tabaria, an elite cavalry unit composed entirely of enslaved boys trained from childhood. French colonial records describe these warriors as devils in iron masks, their faces concealed behind hinged visors to anonymize them from their own kin. Yet oral histories from Zinder's griots tell another side, how some Yan Tabaria used their position to secretly reunite displaced families, exploiting their anonymity to manipulate slave roles. The kingdom's downfall came not from morality but modernity. By 1899, French machine guns breached Zinder's walls, but Damagaram's legacy lingers in haunting ways. The clay bricks of the Burney still bear fingerprints of long-dead masons, some adult, some startlingly small. Conservators debate whether these were children apprenticed in construction or slaves pressed into labor. Meanwhile, descendants of Zinder's scholars preserve Sultan Tanamaun's ice-making techniques, now used to refrigerate vaccines in the same ancient cisterns. The real lesson of Damagaram isn't just about cruelty and power, but about how civilizations often build their greatest achievements atop foundations others are forced to bury. East of Lake Chad, where the savanna bleeds into desert, the kingdom of Bagirmi rose on a foundation of fire and fear. Its Mbang kings ruled from Masenya, a city of mud brick palaces where courtiers whispered that royal power flowed not just from lineage but from possession of the sacred Manda, a bronze staff said to contain the trapped lightning of 100 storms. By the 16th century, Bagirmi had perfected a devastating economic engine, transforming Central African captives into human currency. Arab chronicles describe caravans departing Masenya's gates every dry season, warriors in padded cotton armor driving chained lines of prisoners north toward Libyan markets. But the kingdom's real innovation was in logistics. Their raiders followed seasonal flood patterns, using the Chari River's tributaries like highways to penetrate deep into modern-day Sahara's forests. French explorer Gustave Nachtigal's 1870 sketches capture the system's chilling efficiency. His notebooks show Bagirmi's slave zaribas, fortified stockades where captives were fattened on millet before auctions. One marginal sketch depicts a scale for weighing ivory where notches also marked human load capacities. Yet beneath this brutality lay cultural paradoxes. The same kings who raided for slaves also commissioned exquisite Quranic manuscripts, their margins illustrated with hybrid creatures, part antelope, part Arabic calligraphy. In Masenya's ruins, archaeologists recently uncovered a fused layer of iron shackles and broken writing boards, a physical manifestation of this duality. Then came 1897, the year knowledge itself became a casualty. The Voulet-Chanoine mission, a French colonial force gone rogue, turned Messenia into a slaughterhouse. Survivor accounts describe soldiers tossing manuscripts into bonfires to roast stolen livestock, the ink of centuries-old treaties bubbling alongside animal fat. What wasn't burned was looted, including the Gangola, Bagirmi's royal archive written on gazelle hides. Today, fragments resurface in unlikely places. A land deed in Marseille's archives bears Bagirmi's wax seal on its reverse. A child's math exercise in Lyon's museum is scrawled over a captured tax ledger. Modern Chadian historians face a mosaic with half the pieces missing. Oral traditions fill some gaps. Griots sing of Mbang Abdul Rahman's 17th century reforms, which limited raiding seasons to protect agricultural cycles. Satellite imagery reveals another clue. Faint grid patterns near the Charis banks matching Arabic descriptions of green canals, irrigation projects built by enslaved engineers. The kingdom's true legacy may lie in these contradictions. A civilization that could calculate celestial navigation for slave raids while drafting early environmental protections that worshipped both the Quran and storm staves. Bagirmi forces us to confront uncomfortable truths that greatness and cruelty often share the same foundation, and that some histories can never be fully unearthed, only glimpsed through the smoke of what was burned. The kingdom of Wad didn't just rise to power, it was reborn in blood and ritual, its secrets guarded by the razor-sharp edges of sacred blades. Nestled between the deserts of Sudan and the fertile lands of Chad, this kingdom's authority didn't hinge solely on armies or gold, but on the shadowy Doroth rites, an initiation so brutal, even seasoned Arab chroniclers hesitated to record its details. Picture this: under the full moon, young noblemen were led blindfolded into the Yeri Grove, where elders painted their bodies with ash and whispered the names of ancestors. For 7 days they fasted, danced until their feet bled, and endured the final test, a slash from the ceremonial dagger across their palms, their blood mixed with soil to symbolize union with the land. Only then could they sit in the Nurten, the council of rulers, where decisions were sealed not with signatures but with scars. Yet the real twist in Wadai's story came in the 17th century, when Queen Mother Kul stepped from behind the throne to seize it herself. The Tariq al-Wadai, a fragile manuscript hidden in Abetch's archives, describes how she exploited a crisis, her son's defeat by the Darfur Sultanate, to rally the Doroth initiates to her side. Their loyalty wasn't bought, it was earned. Kul reformed the initiation, replacing the daggers cut with a new trial. Candidates had to solve an impossible riddle about justice while balancing a clay pot of water on their heads. Spill a drop and you failed. Her brilliance, she turned pain into philosophy, binding the elite to her vision. Within a year, her forces crushed Darfur's armies, using tactics inspired by the rituals themselves, warriors camouflaged in ash, moving silently like spirits under moonlight. Wadai's influence didn't stop at the battlefield. The kingdom's legal code, the Kitab al-Hukm, was a masterpiece of balance. Crimes weren't punished uniformly. Penalties varied by the lunar calendar, with theft during drought seasons punished by fines, not amputations. Judges consulted faqihs for Islamic law and qujars for local custom, creating a hybrid system so effective that Chad's modern constitution still echoes its structure. Article 14 of Chad's foundational document, guaranteeing water rights during droughts, a direct descendant of Wadai's principle that the judge who ignores the sky's anger is no judge at all. Abetch's crumbling palaces still whisper of this legacy. In 2019, restorers discovered hidden compartments beneath the royal court, one holding a bundle of human hair, another a scroll listing the names of every Doroth initiate from 1620 to 1890. Most haunting is the Yeri Grove itself, where spectral handprints still stain the rocks, their owners long vanished but their oath enduring. Blood to earth, life to Wadai. The kingdom may have fallen to French cannons in 1912, but its spirit lingers not in monuments, but in the unbroken thread of memory, where lore and legend intertwine like the roots of the sacred baobabs that once shaded its councils. In the heart of the Sahel, where the desert sands meet the Mara Mountains, the kingdom of Darfur spun a legend so enduring it blurred the lines between myth and bloodline. The Kerma dynasty, ruling from their capital at El Fasher, didn't just claim royal ancestry, they insisted their lineage stretched back to the courts of ancient Persia. The Fur Chronicle, a fragile manuscript penned in 1785 by scholar Muhammad al-Tunisi, recounts how Sultan Tayrab's court poets wove elaborate tales of a prince fleeing Sassanid Persia after the Arab conquests, carrying with him not just a crown but a secret, the location of a mountain of gold hidden in Darfur's volcanic highlands. For centuries, historians dismissed this as political theater, until archaeologists excavating Jebel Mara's foothills uncovered something startling. Beneath layers of volcanic ash, they found a bronze seal depicting a lion-headed griffin, its style unmistakably influenced by Persian motifs. Even more telling were the remnants of an irrigation system unlike anything else in the Sahel, Qanat-like tunnels channeling mountain springs, a technology perfected in Persia but previously unseen this far south. The Kerma rulers may have embellished their origins, but the artifacts suggest they weren't fabricating connections entirely. The Fur Chronicle takes a darker turn when it describes how this myth of gold became a curse. In 1785, Egyptian forces under Muhammad Bey Abu al-Dahab invaded Darfur, lured by tales of the mountain's riches. What they found was far more complex and far less metallic. Darfur's true gold was its volcanic soil, so fertile it yielded 3 harvests a year in good seasons. The Kerma kings had mastered terraced farming on Jebel Mara's slopes, creating grain surpluses that fed caravans from the Nile to Lake Chad. The Egyptians, expecting mines, found instead a kingdom thriving on agricultural genius, its wealth measured in millet, not ingots. Sultan Tayrab's defense strategy revealed his dynasty's cunning. Knowing his armies couldn't match Egypt's firepower, he turned the mountains themselves into weapons. The chronicle details how fur warriors diverted seasonal floods into hidden gullies, collapsing them onto invading columns. Others describe fire arrows dipped in sulfur from volcanic vents, their smoke choking narrow passes. Most ingenious were the ghost herds, donkeys with torches tied to their backs, sent stampeding at night to simulate troop movements. By the time Abu al-Dahab retreated, his forces had seized neither gold nor grain, only a grudging respect for Darfur's ability to turn myth into military advantage. Today, the mountain's secret remains half-buried. Satellite surveys show anomalies in Jebel Mara's magnetic fields consistent with either ancient mining or natural mineral deposits. But Darfur's true legacy isn't in what glitters. It's in the still visible terraces where farmers grow sorghum using Kerma-era techniques, and in the oral epics where Persian princes and golden peaks serve as metaphors for resilience. The Kerma dynasty fell to colonial conquest in 1916, but walk the streets of El Fasher and you'll hear the echo of their paradox, a kingdom that spun legends not to hide the truth but to armor it against time. The Blue Nile's swirling currents carried more than silt in the year 1504. They bore the shockwaves of an empire's collapse. When the Funj warriors surged from their heartland near modern Sudan's border, their sudden conquest of Alodia wasn't just a military campaign, it was a cultural earthquake. These were no ordinary raiders. The Funj spoke a language unrelated to their Nubian neighbors, worshipped ancestral spirits alongside Allah, and bore distinctive facial scars that marked them as outsiders turned overlords. Their origin remains one of Africa's great enigmas. Some scholars argue they were remnants of the ancient kingdom of Punt. Others claim they descended from nomadic Blemmyes who'd haunted Roman chronicles. What's undeniable is their impact. Within a decade, the Funj transformed Sennar into a realm where African traditions and Islam fused into something entirely new. At the heart of their success lay an unexpected innovation. The Mamluk system turned on its head. Unlike Egypt's slave soldiers, Sennaar's warrior elite weren't imported. They were recruited from conquered tribes, their loyalty secured through a brilliant cultural alchemy. Funj kings adopted the titles of their defeated foes, weaving Elodian Christian rituals into their coronations while maintaining Quranic courts. The Sennaar Sultan's palace, described by 17th-century Turkish traveler Evliya Çelebi as a labyrinth of domes thatched with gold, became a living symbol of this synthesis. Its throne room featured crosses carved into the walls not as religious symbols but as political theater to reassure subject populations. Then came 1762, when Sennaar's delicate balance shattered spectacularly. The Hammaj Regency began not with a battle cry but a bread riot. Chronicler Ahmed Khatib's Tabakat Wad Dayfala records how a coalition of farmers, blacksmiths, and merchant guilds exhausted by royal extortion stormed the palace during a drought. What followed was unprecedented. The commoners didn't just replace the king, they abolished the very idea of Funj divine right rule. For 83 years, a council of elected officials governed Sennaar, their authority drawn from competence rather than bloodline. The regent's genius lay in their pragmatism. They kept the Funj monarchy as figureheads to maintain stability while secretly controlling the treasury and military. Archaeological finds at Sennaar's docks reveal how deeply the Hammaj transformed society. Before their rise, tax records show levies on peasants consuming 50% of harvest. After, clay tablets list fixed rates of 20%, with exemptions for crop failures, but the Regency's true legacy emerged in its collapse. When an Ottoman-Egyptian invasion loomed in 1821, the last Hammaj regent, Muhammad Wad Adlan, made a fateful choice. He reinstated a puppet Funj sultan, betting nostalgia for the old dynasty could unite resistance. The ploy failed militarily but succeeded culturally today. Sudanese oral poets still sing of the 80 years when the plough ruled, a fleeting moment when meritocracy briefly tamed the Sahel's age-old cult of kingship. The ruins of Sennaar's granaries, their mud bricks still bearing fingerprint grooves from Hammaj-era masons, stand as silent witnesses to history's unlikeliest lesson. Sometimes the most radical revolutions aren't those that tear down palaces, but those that quietly rewrite the rules of who gets to build them. Long before Egypt's pyramids cast their shadows across the Nile, a different colossus rose from the river's banks, the kingdom of Kerma, where towering mud brick temples called Deffufa reached for the sky like ancient skyscrapers. These massive structures, some standing over 60 feet tall, weren't just religious centers, they were the heartbeat of a civilization that rivaled its northern neighbors in wealth and ambition. Walk through the ruins today and you'll find walls 3 meters thick, their bricks still bearing the fingerprints of laborers who mixed clay with straw nearly 4,000 years ago. The largest temple, known as the Western Deffufa, stretches the length of a modern football field, its inner chambers once adorned with gold-leafed walls and ivory-inlaid altars, proof that Kerma's artisans were masters of their craft centuries before the Parthenon's marble gleamed. But Kerma's story takes a dramatic turn when Egyptian scrolls enter the picture. Pharaoh Thutmose I's invasion records boast of reducing Kerma to ashes around 1504 BCE, his scribes vividly describing the vile Kushite city aflame, its temples crumbling like dried reeds. These accounts, etched into temple walls at Karnak, became gospel for Egyptologists until archaeologists started sifting through Kerma's rubble. The evidence tells a different tale. Excavations reveal no widespread burn layers, no heaps of charred grain or melted gold. Instead, the Deffufa's walls show localized scorch marks near their entrances, likely ceremonial fires lit during rituals, not the infernos of conquest. Even more telling, Kerma's necropolis, a sprawling city of the dead with over 30,000 graves, shows uninterrupted use before and after Thutmose's supposed devastation. If the kingdom fell, why did its people keep burying their kings with golden pectorals and sacrificed retainers for generations? The truth may lie in the politics of propaganda. Thutmose's reign marked Egypt's aggressive expansion southward, and what better way to justify costly campaigns than to paint Kerma as a monstrous threat? The pharaoh's scribes copied an age-old playbook. Assyrian kings had exaggerated their enemies' barbarism, and Roman emperors would later inflate battle statistics. But Kerma's artisans fired back in their own medium. In the tomb of a local governor, archaeologists uncovered a frieze depicting Egyptian soldiers not as triumphant conquerors, but as ragged interlopers, their bows broken against Kerma's walls. It's a silent rebuttal in clay and pigment, a 4,000-year-old meme declaring, "We're still here." Modern laser scans of the Deffufa add another twist. Hidden beneath the plaster of the Eastern Temple sanctuary, researchers detected an earlier structure aligned not to the Nile like Egyptian temples, but to the rising of Sirius, a star sacred to Nubian sky watchers. This celestial blueprint suggests Kerma's spiritual roots stretched back even further, long before Thutmose's armies marched south. The kingdom's resilience outlasted his bluster. Within a century, Kerma's influence resurged, its traders supplying ebony, incense, and electrum to an Egypt increasingly dependent on southern luxuries. So was Kerma truly burned? The mud bricks whisper otherwise. They stand today not as ruins of defeat, but as monuments to a civilization that refused to be erased, one whose story wasn't written solely by victors, but also by the hands that shaped its towering temples grain by grain, season after season, under the same stars that still watch over the Nile. While Egypt's pyramids dominate the popular imagination, their southern neighbors in Kush built monuments just as striking, steep-sided, sharp-angled pyramids that clustered like jagged teeth along the Nile's bend at Marah. Where Egypt's Giza complex sprawls with monumental grandeur, Kush's pyramids stand compact and efficient, some barely 30 feet tall but no less imposing. Their design wasn't just aesthetic, it was defiance in stone. Unlike Egypt's smooth limestone veneers, Kushite builders left their pyramid sandstone blocks bare and rough, as if declaring their independence from Pharaoh's playbook. The interiors reveal an even bolder statement. Where Egyptian tombs hid behind labyrinthine passages, Kush's burial chambers lay just beneath the pyramid's apex, their walls covered not in hieroglyphs of judgment, but in vibrant frescoes of feasting and jubilation, a celebration of life rather than a fear of death. This architectural rebellion mirrored Kush's most audacious historical moment, the Napatan revival of 670 BCE, when Kushite kings didn't just mimic Egypt's power but seized it outright. Under Pharaoh Pi, an army of archers and cavalry surged north from Napata, not as raiders but as restorers. Pi's victory stela, discovered near the Temple of Ammon at Jebel Barkal, recounts his campaign with startling nuance. While Egyptian rulers typically boasted of slaughter, Pi emphasized mercy, sparing cities that surrendered and even reinstating defeated dynasts as vassals. His logic was as strategic as it was symbolic. Kush wouldn't just conquer Egypt, it would correct it. Pi's successors, like Taharqa, doubled down on this vision, renovating Thebes' temples while adding distinctly Kushite touches, columns capped with lotus flowers blooming downward instead of up, as if rooting Egyptian divinity back into African soil. Yet the 25th dynasty's reign held a bitter irony. The very Egyptian culture they sought to purify ultimately eclipsed their own. Kushite pharaohs adopted traditional titles like Son of Ra, commissioned cartouches in flawless hieroglyphs, and mummified their dead with imported bitumen. Even their capital at Napata mirrored Thebes' layout, down to the artificial sacred lake beside Ammon's temple. For a fleeting century, Kush was Egypt until Assyrian iron weapons shattered the dream. When Esarhaddon's forces sacked Memphis in 671 BC, Taharqa's retreat south wasn't just a military defeat, it was a cultural crossroads. the Kushites retreated to Meroe, where they deliberately reinvented their identity, abandoning hieroglyphs for a new script called Meroitic and replacing Ammon with the lion god Apodamak. The echoes of this pivot linger in Meroe's ruins. Excavations at the so-called Sun Temple uncovered statues of Apodamak depicted as a man with a lion's head, his jaws clutching broken Egyptian ankhs, a visual manifesto of cultural divorce. Meanwhile, Meroe's iron smelting furnaces, their slag heaps still visible today, birthed an industrial revolution that made Kush the Birmingham of Africa, trading spears and tools as far as India. The lesson of Kush isn't just about pyramids or pharaohs, it's about the resilience of a people who could wear Egypt's crown without losing their soul, then forge a new identity when the old world crumbled. Their monuments stand today not as footnotes to Egypt's glory, but as bold periods in their own epic sentence. The towering obelisks of Axum slice through the Ethiopian highlands like stone lightning bolts frozen mid-strike monolithic declarations of a kingdom that once commanded trade routes from Rome to India. The tallest still standing rises 60 feet, its precise corners and intricate false door carvings demonstrating engineering prowess that puzzled later Arab historians who called them elephants' teeth planted by giants. Yet these stelae, dating to the 4th century AD, tell only half the story. Local tradition weaves them into a far older tapestry, the legend of the Queen of Sheba, whose mythical visit to King Solomon supposedly birthed Axum's Solomonic dynasty. The Kebra Nagast, Ethiopia's 14th century national epic, claims Sheba's son Menelik stole the Ark of the Covenant from Jerusalem and enshrined it in Axum's Church of Our Lady Mary of Zion, where priests still guard a replica today. Modern archaeologists smile at the connection, but intriguing clues persist. Excavations beneath the stelae field revealed a pre-Christian altar aligned with Sirius, a star sacred to both Axumites and Sabaeans, hinting at cultural exchange far older than the obelisks themselves. What transformed Axum from a regional power to a civilization straddling continents was its mastery of the monsoon winds. By timing voyages to the shifting air currents, Axumite merchants could reach southern India in 40 days, half the time Roman ships required. The Periplus of the Erythraean Sea, a 1st century Greek navigational guide, marvels at Adulis, Axum's Red Sea port, where warehouses bulged with African ivory bound for Persian Gulf pearls and Chinese silk. Coins minted by King Azana in the 330s AD proclaim him King of the Axumites, Himyarites, and Sabaeans, a title spanning the Red Sea's western and eastern shores. This wasn't mere bravado. In 2005, divers off Yemen's coast discovered an Axumite shipwreck carrying wine amphorae stamped with Azana's sun and crescent symbol, proof of direct trade between Axum and Arabia Felix. Then came the cracks in Axum's foundation, both literal and economic. Scholars still debate whether the kingdom's decline began with environmental collapse or geopolitical shifts. Soil core studies from the Tigray Plateau reveal a startling pattern. Centuries of intensive plowing and deforestation stripped the highlands of topsoil, reducing crop yields by nearly 70% between 600 and 800 AD. Axumite farmers, unaware they were mining their own fertility, may have starved their golden goose, but others point to the Red Sea's changing tides of power. When Persia's Sasanian Empire seized Yemen in 570 AD, they rerouted Indian Ocean trade through the Persian Gulf, starving Axum of customs revenue. The final blow came from an unexpected quarter, Islam's rise. As Arab merchants unified the Red Sea under a single faith and language, Christian Axum became a cultural island, its once vital ports reduced to backwaters. The kingdom's legacy, however, refused to fade. When 12th century crusaders searched for Prester John's mythical Christian kingdom, they envisioned Axum reborn. Today, its obelisks peer over ceremonies where priests chant Jez Axum's ancient tongue as living proof that empires may fall, but their echoes never fully silence. The real Queen of Sheba may remain elusive, but the stones of Axum still whisper her name to those who know how to listen. Herodotus called them cave dwellers, but the Garamantes were anything but primitive. In the blistering heart of the Sahara, where temperatures scorch past 120 degrees, this kingdom thrived beneath the sand itself, their secret. A labyrinth of tunnels called fagaras, an underground irrigation network so vast it turned over 500 arid valleys into flourishing oases. Satellite images from NAS, a Terra spacecraft, reveal ghostly circles dotting the Libyan desert like bullet holes, each marking where vertical shafts once plunged 60 feet down to connect these hidden waterways. The Garamantes didn't just survive the desert, they rewrote its rules, channeling fossil water trapped in aquifers since the last ice age through hand-dug channels that stretched for thousands of miles. Recent excavations at their capital, Garama, uncovered something astonishing: a 4-story palace with frescoed walls depicting not camels but chariots. These weren't the lumbering war wagons of Egypt. They were lightweight, horse-drawn vehicles with spoked wheels, capable of racing across dunes at speeds that shocked Roman observers. The Garamantes used them to dominate trans-Saharan trade, linking sub-Saharan gold markets to Mediterranean ports. Archaeologists found workshop debris proving they manufactured their own chariots, along with iron tools bearing metallurgical signatures matching ores from as far away as the Atlas Mountains. This was no isolated tribe. It was a technological powerhouse that mastered metallurgy, hydrology, and desert warfare centuries before the Arab caravans. Then there's the mystery of their decline. Roman accounts blamed the desert reclaiming its children, but sediment cores tell a more complex tale. Pollen samples from dried-up oasis lakes show a sharp drop in date palm and olive traces around 400 AD, not from drought but from over-extraction. The Garamantes had mined their ancient water reserves like gold, draining aquifers faster than they could recharge. Their final act, a desperate pivot to slave raiding, documented in Byzantine records describing Garamantes warriors dragging captives into the desert to dig yet more tunnels. By the time Arab geographer al-Bakri arrived in the 8th century, he found only ruins and whispers of a people who drank the earth dry. Yet the Garamantes left clues that still baffle scientists. At the remote oasis of Tin Alkum, researchers mapping fagaras with ground-penetrating radar detected anomalies: tunnels branching sideways into perfectly circular chambers too small for human passage. Local Tuareg legends speak of Kel Esaf, spirits of solitude, said to guard subterranean reservoirs. Modern hydrologists have a simpler explanation. The Garamantes may have engineered these as pressure chambers to prevent tunnel collapses, a technique not seen again until 19th century European mines. Either way, their legacy lingers in the most unexpected places. Libyan farmers still revive ancient fagaras during droughts, and the Berber word for water source, Targa, lives on in the name of the very desert that buried them, the Targa Valley. The Garamantes didn't vanish, they simply returned to the shadows, leaving behind a blueprint for turning the impossible into the ordinary. The Niger River bends sharply at Gao, creating a natural fortress where the currents themselves became weapons, and no one wielded them more ruthlessly than Soni Ali Bur, the so-called sorcerer king of the Songhai Empire. While later chronicles like the Tariq al-Sudan would paint his successor Askia the Great as a pious Muslim reformer, Soni Ali's reign was a masterclass in pragmatic, unconventional warfare. His fleet of Kanta, swift, shallow-drafted canoes armored with hippopotamus hides, patrolled the river like waterborne cavalry, striking with terrifying precision. Arab traders' accounts describe how Soni's forces could disappear into the Niger's labyrinthine tributaries, only to emerge days later hundreds of miles upstream, sacking cities before defenses could mobilize. But the real genius lay in his manipulation of the environment. During the dry season, he ordered dams built to divert the river, stranding enemy boats in mud. When the rains came, his engineers breached levees to flood rival encampments, turning the land itself against his foes. The Tariq al-Sudan, written by Islamic scholar Abd al-Sadi in the 17th century, frames Sonny Oli's tactics as borderline demonic. One passage claims he summoned clouds of stinging flies to blind opposing archers, while another accuses him of shape-shifting into a vulture to spy on enemies. These allegations weren't just superstition, they were political theater. By branding Sonny Oli a practitioner of sihr sorcery, Askia's propagandists justified his overthrow as a holy war against un-Islamic practices. Yet dig into Sonny military records preserved in Timbuktu's archives, and a different pattern emerges. His magic often had startlingly practical explanations. The flying spies were likely scouts using smoke signals from hidden watchtowers along the river. The invincible armor described in battle accounts matches excavated examples of quilted cotton soaked in saltpeter solutions, making it resistant to fire arrows. Sonny Oli's most audacious gambit came in 1468, when he laid siege to the scholarly city of Jen. Traditional armies had failed to conquer its island fortress for centuries, but Sonny turned the Niger's flow against its walls. Over 3 months, his engineers rerouted subsidiary channels to erode Jen's foundations, while archers launched clay pots filled with scorpions over the walls. When the city finally fell, the Tariq condemns his execution of scholars as sacrilege, but neglects to mention he spared the very artisans and architects whose skills would later build Songhai's golden age. The contrast between Sonny Oli and Askia reveals a deeper rift in Sahelian statecraft, the clash between indigenous African governance and imported Islamic models. Where Askia centralized power through Quranic courts and Arabic bureaucracy, Sonny ruled through a network of riverine outposts and kinship alliances. His alleged sorcery may have simply been a mastery of local knowledge, reading bird migrations to predict storms, or using termite mound patterns to locate underground water. Modern hydrologists have confirmed many of his recorded battle sites align with hidden aquifers, suggesting his uncanny troop placements were strategic exploitation of resources outsiders couldn't see. Today, the Niger still whispers Sonny Oli's legacy. Fishermen near Gao point to half-submerged stone pylons, remnants of his submerged defense systems, while scholars debate whether his reputation as a tyrant or genius is the greater fabrication. The truth likely lies in the river's muddy depths, where history, like water, refuses to be channeled into simple narratives. The echoes of these lost kingdoms still whisper across the Sahel today, not just in crumbling ruins, but in the very crises reshaping the region. The droughts that starved Ghana's gold trade now return with fiercer heat, turning farmlands to dust. The political fractures that splintered Jollof replay in modern border conflicts. Even the colonial lootings of Benin and Dahomey find their parallel in today's black market trade of artifacts, where terracotta heads from Mali sell for millions while locals fight to protect their heritage. History never truly repeats, but it rhymes with haunting precision. Yet there's hope in the fragments we've yet to lose. Take Tadmeka, the Mecca of the Sahara, once a bustling desert port where gold was weighed against manuscript pages in shadowed courtyards. Today, its ruins hide under dunes near Mali's border, but archaeologists recently uncovered something astonishing. A merchant's ledger scratched onto a pottery shard, detailing transactions in Arabic, Tifinagh, and Soninke. This wasn't just accounting, it was proof of a cosmopolitan hub where cultures converged as equals. Similar stories wait at Kumbai Sale's unexcavated suburbs, where ground-penetrating radar reveals intact workshops beneath the sand, and in the caves of Niger's Air Mountains, where faded frescoes depict kings and camels vanished from all written records. Preservation isn't just about saving relics, it's about reclaiming voices. When Songhai scholars fled Timbuktu's burning libraries in 2012, they smuggled out thousands of manuscripts in donkey carts and fishing boats, proving that memory outlasts empires. Now, digital projects like the Sahel Manuscripts Initiative scan these texts, revealing lost chapters on everything from astronomy to conflict resolution that could inform modern crises. A 17th century treat is on sharing well water during droughts found in a family attic in Mauritania. Recently helped villagers adapt to climate change, proof that the past isn't dead, only waiting to be consulted. The Sahel's kingdoms teach us that collapse isn't an end, but a scattering like seeds carried by the Harmattan winds, settling where the soil is ready. Their legacies live in the women of Sign who still lead village councils, in the stargazing traditions of Tuareg navigators guiding migrants across deserts, and in the blacksmiths of Dendi hammering iron with Songhai rhythms. To walk these lands is to tread on layers of resilience, each generation adding its stratum of survival. So when you see reports of instability in the Sahel, look deeper. Behind the headlines lie continuities stronger than empires. The same rivers that fed Ghana still nurture farmers. The same trade routes now bear solar panels instead of salt slabs. What we call lost was never truly gone, just buried, like the library of Gengino, where every shard of pottery holds a universe of questions. The invitation stands to dig, to listen, and to carry forward these fragments of memory before the sands claim them for good. The next chapter of the Sahel story isn't written in ruins, but in the hands of those who choose to remember.